Namaste, I'm Jaya Palashri, back on talking about lessons I've learnt. Yesterday, I spoke about boundaries, I spoke about going with the flow, I spoke about the importance of setting boundaries. Today, I continue to talk about boundaries and what we need to do and how we need to protect ourselves. These boundaries are not set to isolate people. These boundaries are not set to isolate ourselves. These boundaries are set because we choose to protect ourselves and we choose to be in a space where we don't get hurt. Some of the common questions is, how do I set boundaries? Do I need to set boundaries? Setting boundary for each one is different. I will talk about setting boundaries on my own personal experience. I absolutely had no clue of what setting boundaries was, what the importance was, and how to do it. But in the process of learning counseling, getting into learning to become a life coach, to learn the skills, and on the path of becoming a shaman, a healer, I started realizing how important it is to protect yourself, especially when you start healing and you start realizing your weaknesses. We all want to be loved. We all want to be acknowledged. We all want to be respected. We want that from none other than our loved ones. At times, when you're taken for granted, when you feel that you've allowed yourself to be used as a doormat, as an afterthought, when people just take you for granted, they don't give a second thought about what you want to do or why you are there or not there. These are clear indications that your boundaries are not set and you have allowed yourself to be used and you are lacking something in your space. I was in a space where I felt I was used as a doormat. I'm not playing the victim here, nor am I trying to get sympathy here, but I'm just stating facts. I went through a phase in my life where I felt it. It's not that I was treated that way, but at the same time, you go through it. So having to go through something like that, having to go through a fact where you are treated like a doormat as an afterthought, starts making you wonder, is it worth it? And then you start questioning yourself. You start asking yourself as to what am I doing? And often I've heard people say, no one loves me, I'm not loved, people don't listen to me, I'm unheard, so many things like that. So these are things that I would often say too, only to realize that there was something lacking in my space. So while I was trying to understand what boundaries are, so the first time I heard about boundaries was in my shamanic class. The very day one, I started hearing boundaries. So when they were talking about boundaries, I was thinking of these strong cemented walls or concrete walls. And I was just thinking, why would I want to put concrete walls around me? And do I want to do something like that? It took me some time to understand what a boundary is. It took me some time to understand that this is not who I am and I need to change. So, like I spoke about yesterday, everything is interlinked and, one thing is connected to the other. So, in the process of setting boundaries, and trying to understand what boundaries are and things like that, I started working on myself and I started seeing which are my weak spots, which needs to be worked on. So when I'm setting boundaries, I cannot blame anyone else for hurting me. I cannot blame someone else for not hearing me or disrespecting me, because I realized that everything lies within me. When I don't love myself, when I don't acknowledge myself, when I give myself as an afterthought, when I am not ready to respect myself, my own thoughts, and I start condemning myself, saying that, I'm such a useless, or whatever it can be. So when I'm in that space of doing that, how can I expect someone else to acknowledge me, love me, or even respect me? If someone needs to respect me, love me, and acknowledge me, I have to change. The change has to come within me, not within them. I cannot expect an external person or the external energies to change and bring the change to me, but the change had to be me. That was a very difficult step for me to understand and to work on. And I used a lot of Ho'oponopono when I had to work and to set boundaries and to bring the change. So even before I started setting boundaries, I started cutting cords. We always leave cords attached to our loved ones, and the pain comes from your loved ones. It could be your spouses, your children, your parents, friends. It is always the people you love for and care for is where the hurt comes. Is it bad? No. Is it part of the game? 100%. Because everything brings lessons to us. Every pain is a beautiful lesson. Some lessons come in a nice way. Some lessons come the hard way. And pain is one of the hard way the lessons come to us. And we need to know and understand and accept it for what it is. So for me to start setting boundaries for myself, I'm just talking about myself. I'm not talking about that this might work for you, not work for you. You can pick what you like and what suits you. So when I chose to start setting boundaries, the first thing I started doing is I started working on self-love. It took me a long time to work on my own self-love because my self-confidence and self-esteem went pretty low. I wouldn't blame anybody for this but myself, because I allowed myself to get into a space where I felt the way I did. So working on it was very difficult for me, but I didn't give up. I worked on self-love. I worked with some affirmations. I did a lot of exercises. And after I started working on myself, I did a lot of work with shamanism on myself. After I worked on myself and I worked with self-love, I went on to self-respect as well as self-esteem. There's nothing that I didn't leave any stone unturned when it came to these things, and I was very sure that I had to bring about the right change in me, and I had to do whatever had to be done the right way. So as I started working with self-love, self-respect, self-esteem, I started noticing things that would trigger and I would get hurt. So I started saying, okay, now this is not going to be allowed into my space. So for example, when I started putting love into my space, I started noticing if someone looked down upon me or if someone said something which I felt unloved or whatever it is, I immediately started cutting cords and saying this kind of energy is not welcomed in my space. It is very difficult to start with because initially your boundaries are going to be collapsible and you're going to allow them time and again because of whatever reason. But then you start saying, you know what, I will not entertain this kind of energy in my space because I'm in a happy space. So when you start doing that, you're slowly setting boundaries, and the boundaries start becoming stronger with time. It cannot happen overnight. It's not like building a wall where today you build it and you're saying, oh, I've built a strong boundary. But it is about building it over a period of time so that you have a strong boundary and you know exactly what to do and how to go about it. So having said that, I end today's session talking about boundaries and the lessons I have learned. And now I will come back to you again talking more about boundaries and how important it is to work with it. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day, and I shall see you all soon. Thank you.
Because I'm going to the gym after.